Starting live.
Aaron, why isn't George here? I'm so sad.
George is so busy, he's doing my job.
Oh, well, as long as you get paid.
Yeah. Okay, that's going to go from funny to sad real quick.
What is it's October. Oh, thank you.
October 2nd.
Welcome to the OLUG Omaha Linux User Group meeting for October 2018. I'm John Larson, your host on the prices, right? No whammies. Ubuntu 18.10 just came out.
So does Fedora 29.
Did it?
Fedora 29 beta.
Oh, there you go. All right. Do we still have the ultimate Linux distro that just has continuous release yet?
Yeah, it's called Arch.
Arch? Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't know Arch did that.
Arch is a rolling release. Everything.
I thought I saw something about a new one recently. Huh. I don't know if they call it everything Linux or something like that.
Huh.
Maybe I'm just thinking aloud in my own head.
But...
See? Get it? Haha. What are you showing here? The Amazon Basics smartphone repair kit.
$8 will get you into your phone.
Oh, it's an add-on item. We'll have to buy something else too.
Yeah, well, that's always the way.
$8 to get in, huh?
It's actually not bad. Little kid, I've got mine.
I'm debating on getting a Motorola E4 as my work phone.
Wow.
Well, if anybody's followed any of the message boards on Gmail for Oreo and beyond, they changed the notification methods in Android. So you cannot do a different ringtone for every label. So people would have all these complex filters set up for different labels. It's like boss would have one ringtone, yes. Wife would have another. Oh, yes. That went away a year and 2 months ago. There's a really long thread of people who are pretty upset. I subscribed to that thread back then. I'm still getting messages about it. People go buy a new phone, found it doesn't work, and they find the thread and voice their disgust.
I can't believe nobody's
it's
functionality back in yet. So.
Well, yes. Well, it didn't come back in 9 because they changed how the notifications worked with like the do not disturb and stuff. So.
Trying to control everything.
There's always E1.
And?
No, it's an alternative firmware for phones.
Oh.
It's the follow-on from CyanogenMod.
Oh, okay.
It's done by Gail Duvall.
Okay. So it's an easier to pronounce name.
It was initially like LLE or something, but it kept getting autocorrect, so I changed it.
Couldn't have your product get autocorrected.
That definitely will take down your hits. Aren't you going to mention Torvalds?
Oh, yeah. He stepped away from the Linux kernel mailing list, and they've put in a code of conduct for the mailing list. How many developers did we lose?
None that I'm aware of, none of the big ones yet.
Okay.
But it was one very interesting thing. They were talking about the possibility of people who contributed code under the old meritocracy was saying they had a right to pull their code from the kernel.
No, they don't.
That's a bit. Well, you still have the copyright on the thing. If you're making a contribution under certain assumptions, those assumptions change. I mean, GPL3 addresses it.
Who said? Somebody said that they can't rescind it. Who was it? Was it Stallman?
Stallman may have said it, but of course Raymond put himself into it as well.
Maybe that's who said it.
But he said you can if there is a definite change in the thing. But who knows? It's an interesting time. If not, Linux may get all rebranded under GPL3 or in some other license.
A Linux license.
There is supposed to be a Linux license. Raymond and a bunch of other guys are supposed to have written one years ago. If GPL2 fails, they're supposed to have an alternative license. But I think it just became GPL3.
Okay. Interesting. So tonight, talking about routers?
Yes.
All sorts of routers?
Just basic stuff, less basic routing stuff.
Cool. Well, that's awesome.
Who's talking next month?
We're working on that. We may have something later, so we'll see.
I still want to see Theo Durat and OpenBSD get a code of conduct. If you don't know, OpenBSD is a spinoff of NetBSD, and the main reason OpenBSD came into existence because they kicked Theo out for being hard to work with. Let's just do that. And he said, "I'll screw you. I'll make my own version of BSD." He did. He's still doing it, but he has quite a personality as well. Very smart guy. But other interesting thing that came out of the whole code of conduct thing was that I finally found out how much Torvald's getting paid a year. Guess how much Linux Foundation pays him a year, supposedly?
$100,000.
$1.6 million. But he's worth it. And who knows who gives him stock options? I mean, he's probably doing all that.
So he can take some downtime.
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, that and all the Transmeta stock he's got, that's got to be worth tens of dollars.
Oh, that's true.
Tens of dollars. Transmeta was an amazing concept.
Power management.
Initially, it was going to be a whole CPU chip emulation on top of another chip, which just really doesn't work. So one reason we're all running Itaniums now, we're emulating x86 code, so it doesn't really work that well. But might as well kick off the thing.
Didn't stop the bug earlier this year.
Alternative firmware, I've called this, I've talked a bunch of different things over the years. One of them is fix your effing router already. I haven't done the talk in quite some time, but disclaimer, we're going to be talking about flashing and making changes to your router. Replacing the firmware on a router probably will invalidate your warranty, and in worst case scenario, give you a very, very poor nightlight instead of a router.
There's a reason we love you, Aaron. It's right there.
So, for a lot of routers, you do have a choice of firmware, which is really nice. There's several alternative firmwares available. We'll talk about a few of them tonight. Available for a bunch of different routers.
Can I insert a comment real quick about that nightlight thing? You can buy on Amazon these little film dots that allows you to kill the LEDs on your equipment, and you can do various layers of them to make them even darker. But yeah, I have a sheet of them. They work very well.
That's when you have a bunch of blue LEDs lighting your whole room.
Yes.
Two quick questions. How many of you are running the stock firmware on your router?
Stock could be upgraded.
Some people read ahead. So, I mean, all you guys are running pretty much stock firmware. All right. If any of you guys tried it, DDWRT, OpenWRT, LibreCMC, HyperWRT, Tomato, there's a bunch of other ones.
DDWRT came on.
Actually, Buffalo?
Asus.
Asus.
I looked for it specifically.
Excellent. All right.
Asus WRT. No, it was DD.
It was.
Now you're making me question himself.
Yeah. I always question.
We worked on a BPM project for a while. That's why you were investigating the PD work.
No, but I think the one like that, I'll find
But
that.
keep in mind also, some of these do have branded versions of that software. Like this little miniature travel router comes with a version of OpenWRT, but it's compiled by the actual device manufacturer. And how many of you upgraded your firmware in your router, or at all, ever?
But it's still manufactured firmware.
Yeah, I know.
We upgraded.
All right,
Yeah.
Sure.
Because,
There's been a whole bunch of there's always a bunch of vulnerabilities and stuff like that. So if you got questions, comments anytime, except for you, Matt. Feel free to ask. No, it's if there's anything else anybody has to contribute, by all means, don't wait till the end, because the end may come sooner, we all think. Hopefully it'll be interactive, productive. No promises, no guarantees. But, why alternate firmware? Quite simply because you can. I didn't put that one down there. You're able to do things that the original manufacturers might have intended for the router. You can set it up as a bridge, except on a mesh network. You can do all sorts of stuff with it. You set up repeaters. You can increase or reduce the transmit power for the device. Which, by the way, if you really want to play around, some routers will let you overpower the radio to a point where you'll burn the router up pretty much. So don't. If you see the settings like 27, and it goes up to like 200, maybe try 50 first. Don't try 200 to start out with, but it can do all sorts of things. VPN, Ethernet over IP, EOIP, which means you can actually take two routers, set them both up. They'll run connect the IPs over the Ethernet and do it all transparently. I've had a brief golden period where that worked tremendously well, and it's never worked for me since. But it still has some interesting things there. You turn on SSH and tell them to access to your router you want to. Continued security patches, updates. We all know a lot of companies just eventually flush their routers and just say that's the end of it. You can do things at a network level, like you can install ad block and child safety software at the router to make it harder to bypass. Example being, there's a guy I work with who his kid figured out how to get access to the router's password and was able to reset some stuff because he wanted access to certain parts of the net that were blocked off. And it's like, this is one of the situations where the guy was, the kid installed a keylogger on the machine that was used for it. And he's both incredibly angry at the child and also kind of proud. It's one of those situations. But you can do that kind of stuff with the router, which makes it a little tougher to do. IPv6 support and transitioning support. Whenever we all hit IPv6, when that magical day comes, it's getting to be more and more common. I mean, it's
it'll come the same day weeks convert to the metric system.
Yeah, that's definitely a possibility. You want to do things like run BitTorrent software, or you want to install software on your router. You want to do all sorts of things because you can't. There's a whole lot.
So I've seen YouTubes where they talk about the mesh network in Detroit. Is anybody around Omaha running mesh networks, like in their neighborhoods or for fun? Or?
I know people running networks in their houses just to keep the stuff up. But in terms of overall mesh networks, I'm not sure if anyone's doing it. There was a project called Open Wireless, but that really didn't take off the way I hoped it would.
Depends on how you define mesh.
Okay.
It might just be mesh as a backhaul to keep connectivity between devices. So most of the B-Link system in Council Bluffs is like that.
Nice.
So if you see, you can actually see them on the street lights.
Nice.
They take the dawn dusk sensor off the top. They stick in an adapter, put the sensor back on, then it powers the router. You'll see it like on the side.
That's really cool.
Cool.
Yeah, it is pretty cool because they don't have to run extra wire.
Oh, I think it's just how many streetlights are. That's much cool. So yeah, also because it pretty much makes your router into a general purpose computer if you want to. But no, cool. A little bit of history lesson. The Linksys WRT54GL. It was released in 2005. The Linksys flipped the firmware to Linux from VxWorks starting with version 5. Cisco was sued by the GPL people for initially not releasing the code. The case was settled, and people began to play with the code that was released and create alternative firmwares for the router. People continued to modify, create alternative firmwares for their routers since this time. This is why it's called DDWRT, OpenWRT, so on and so forth, because they come from this history. And there's been many versions of this router. They usually put an L at the end for Linux, and people for a while there were paying insane amounts on eBay for the original ones. I wanted the original because they actually had a little more RAM than a lot of people need in those situations.
As long as the radios weren't burnt out.
Yeah, as long as you didn't overpower it. I mentioned 4 alternative firmwares tonight: DWRT, OpenWRT, Libre CMC, Tomato WRT. There's a bunch of others exist as well. There's nothing to prevent anybody from going out and creating their own firmware, to be honest. You can go out and grab it. Tomato, there's a couple limitations. I will talk about that. But anybody can go out and grab the source code for anyone that's open source, compile it up their own, put their own logo into it, do whatever they want to. And that's how a lot of them got started. It's just a guy wanted a little bit different thing. DDWRT. The DD comes from the license plate prefix for Dresden, Germany, where the initial development team lived. WRT comes from the Cisco router. DDWRT supports a lot of hardware. It's the best resource is to hit the router database at, we'll just go ahead and hit the router database.
They done any updates to that?
No.
It still looks the same as it did 10 years ago.
I gotta say, it has a nostalgic.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, there you go.
Classic look.
I know where everything is.
Like the Joomla-based one.
Come on, router database.
Yeah, here we go.
And then you take a look for something like, let's type in 8413N, because we care about that, because that's what that router is. And you'll see there's a whole bunch of little pieces of information there, revisions, supported, yes, activation required, all sorts of stuff. And the latest and greatest version, number 13, is not supported because they flipped the chip inside internally to micro ATX mega or something like that. I don't know. It just isn't currently supported. One of the ways that these tend to get supported over time is there was people who would say, hey, I want to support this router. Well, why don't you ship this person this router and they'll work on it? There's a whole bunch of the work on the mailing list and stuff like that going through the whole process. So if there's a router you really love and you have a lot of, that's one way to handle trying to get it supported. There's other cases people pay bounties to get certain routers supported and stuff like that over time. But that just gives you an idea. If your router's not in there, there may also be a firmware alternative as well. This isn't the end all of databases for this, but it's the major database. This is what comes from DDWRT. If you look through the wiki and stuff like that, you may find other alternative firmwares that people are working on that are experimental or something. So the important thing is just do your research on it pretty much. So that's a great place to start. Read the wiki. Always read the wiki. Wiki has lots and lots of information. So as actually the default firmware we ship with some routers such as Buffalo networking products, and apparently some ASUS routers. Just found out. Linksys has alternative DDWRT software available for most of the routers. So if you go to their site, there's usually a little section where they talk about that, and you can go download and stuff. There's also myopenrouter.org, which has the Kong firmware, which supports a whole bunch of Netgear devices. That's been in a weird spot over the years because for a while there, it seemed like the gentleman wasn't being encouraged to work on it because he actually, I think, may have worked for Netgear at the time or something. There was some always politics. It's the great thing about open source software is the politics are also tend to be a little more open sometimes. But the Kong router stuff's out there. It works pretty well for most people. Not everybody, which we'll talk about in a couple minutes. DDWRT is my go-to distribution for most of the time. I know the interface pretty well, and it works on most of the hardware I try to play with. DDWRT also has something called opware packages, which makes a lot of additional packages available to install your router. If you do want to run torrents on there, you do want to do this, you do want to do that, all sorts of options. It can do a lot of amazing things. Here's a quick example of DDWRT in place in the real world. My parents' house has a ASUS 1300 AC router in the den. It's a pretty good router. Currently running DDWRT on it. Always a good sign. Downstairs is an LG plasma TV. One of the last of the plasmas. Tremendous TV. Love the TV. Could not be happier with the TV, except for one thing. Its network sucks. It continually drops the 5 gigahertz connection. And every time it drops it, it forces you to re-enter the pre-shared key. And the pre-shared key I have set at my parents' place, they don't know. I do know, and it is 27 characters long. It is a mix of lower, uppercase, special characters, which you get to type on a little thing going. It takes an average of a minute and a half to enter it wrong, and about 2 minutes to enter it correctly. So I figure out an average of about 10 minutes every time it does it. And it drops it all the time. So what I did was I took one of their older routers, a Linksys, I think it was an N600, put DDWRT on it, set it up as a bridge router, and just did the cable connection to that router. And now that router talks to the other router, and it, as far as the TV thinks, it has a wired connection, so it doesn't care about anything anymore. So it doesn't drop the connections anymore. I don't have to deal with any of this crap anymore. And it's made it life much better. And it also, performance also seems pretty well, working pretty well with it as well. Because theoretically, it's almost future-proof, because if I upgrade the upstairs to an AC, and upgrade downstairs to an AC in the future sometime, I'll get AC speeds going over the wires. So. Yes?
Newegg is still selling the WRT 54GL.
How much?
$37.
Ooh!
The WRT 54G is also still for sale. $80.
Stock up. Put them in the freezer.
There really isn't that much. I mean, I don't know.
I'm just kidding.
There's that much benefit to it. I mean, the routers, the technology is getting better on these all the time.
So Linksys is wired?
The Linksys is wired from the TV to the router, but it does wireless connection over the over that. Just it's a bridge repeater.
Used to be gaming adapters you could buy for gaming systems before they had Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
It did the same thing. It would just connect to your wireless and make a wired network locally.
Also, they used a lot of them. HP has a version for various printers and stuff that don't support that will let it support wireless for connectivity and stuff. But all it does, I mean, as far as the TV is concerned, it has a wired connection. It just gets an IP address. It's all happy. Works pretty well for me. I mean, it also was a good use for the old N600.
Is your plasma working?
Plasma's working fine. It runs about probably about 10 hours a week. It's just driving around there. But the thing about plasma TVs, to get off into a tangent, they can do black, which no TVs except OLEDs can do otherwise. Because there's dimming zones, all that kind of stuff. But LED always has backlit, and just you can't get there unless you go OLED. And OLED is incredibly expensive. I love mom and dad a lot. But I'm not buying them an OLED TV anytime soon. Yeah. Here's example number 2. My current DDWRT setup, I have a Nighthawk router. It's a phenomenally nice router. It's fast. It works really well with stock firmware and other things. So I ran DDWRT on it for some time. Cannot get consistent 5 gigahertz access on it. Every now and then, just bam, just drops out. It just doesn't appear. I don't know why. I've never figured it out. So I reverted the stock firmware for the time being. I have to access some limitations I don't like in the stock firmware. One of the things is when I get a DHCP lease for like my Debian box, it sends the host name to the router. It says, hey, this is the Debian box. Associate this IP address with the name Debian. If anybody does a DNS lookup, this is Debian. The Netgear router, nope. I'm not going to resolve crap for you. You better know some IP addresses or you better be comfortable running Nmap. Those are your 2 options. So I've ended up moving my DNS masquerade onto my server, which has been annoying. So yeah, it's kind of annoying. So the thing is, I continue to monitor Conf firmware, see if one of them will fix the issue. Try every now and then, like every month or so, I'll go, hey, I don't need network for a while. Let's reflash it. Then for a while it'll work. Then it quits working. It works. So it hasn't been a tremendous success. But I got back to stock firmware without any problems. I don't even. It's 1700, I believe. 17 or 19. It's a decent. I mean, I paid $250 for a router. And one of the limitations of the DWRT is the stock firmware is faster than the DWRT firmware. You can resolve that issue a little bit by overclocking it, but there's some other stuff with it. So the Conf firmware is very nice. I continue to monitor, see if they'll fix the issue, and it has not been a tremendous success right now. And as being someone who loves DDWRT by default, I'm really kind of annoyed by it. So the moral is not always a success, but hopefully you get back to where you started. If it doesn't go well for you. But mom and dad's place working phenomenally well. So I do have a TP-Link 841N, which I have set up with a couple of SIDs, which I use for research and stuff like that. It's a brother or sister to this one. And I use that when I want to keep stuff segregated on the network, when I want to do research and stuff like that over time. And I want to make sure that can't talk to anything else on my machine. So I have various DNS masquerade rules, both on the 841N, and I also have a couple rules on the Nighthawk as well to prevent crosstalk between the two. They can both talk out to the internet, but they can't talk to the 192.168 network except for that one subset. So I have them reasonably well segregated. Is it perfect? No, but it does make it a lot tougher for people to do stuff. If you ever run into a situation where you're going to plug someone's laptop in that you're helping them resolve an issue with, and you have tremendous concerns about what's on that laptop, you want to make sure it doesn't have a possibility to affect your internal network, having something like that is very nice. But I got to lock down very tightly what I can and can't do. I don't have a lockdown by MAC addresses, but I could do that as well. But I do have DDWRT set up right at home right now, just a little subsection. So that's a little about DDWRT has some other capabilities you can do, like you can stick a USB hard drive on it. Then you can, well, the thing about a USB stick or USB hard drive is right now, by default, you have a read-only file system except for NVRAM for writing various values and stuff like that. if you put a USB stick in one that supports it, this one doesn't, but a lot of them do, you can actually create a read-write file system, which you can actually create an overlay of updating stuff, which you want to put on there in terms of new packages, all sorts of capabilities. It makes a lot more full feature, but it also that way lies madness. So keep that in mind. But DWRT, if you want to use it, your router as a router, highly recommend that version. There's also OpenWRT. It is a smaller distribution than the DWRT. It isn't only used in routers. There used to be this thing called Ben's NanoNote. I don't know if you guys ever saw it. It's about the size of a can of soda. It's a very small little computer. And it ran OpenWRT. If you look at certain light bulbs run OpenWRT, stuff like that. It's around various places you wouldn't expect it to be. You can also run OpenWRT if you want to on your desktop. I wouldn't probably do that because I don't believe anyone's got an X for Wayland or any stuff like that for it, but you can do it. So one of the cool things about this, and it was one of the first things they did before a lot of other people did, is they used the build root system, which continually build it automatically for source. So it built it across all the versions every night. There's systematically drops. So every time there's a source code change, it pretty much got just, here's a new one, here's a new one, new one. And it would build for all the various platforms. Did it test for all the platforms? Oh no, that was up to the user, but there's new versions available for it. It uses the old package format. It has a lot of additional packages available for it as well. Python is available, which means you can do Scapy with it. I don't know if you guys have ever done Scapy.
I have not.
Scapy is Python's packet capture analysis tool. It lets you pull packets into a place where you can do analysis about changes to them and all sorts of wonderful things. It is a very nice part of it, and it is available in OpenWRT. You can also get through it through DDWRT if you install various packages on that as well, but OpenWRT makes it a little bit easier. I did just buy a cheap router with it a couple weeks ago as a customized version of OpenWRT from the manufacturer, but it's supposed to be regular OpenWRT. I haven't played with this at all yet. I just opened the box last night because I figured, hey, I'll open the box before I come over, but no, nothing more. So we'll take a look at it in a bit. Libre CMC. For every open source project, there will be an open source fork of it that is very concerned with being 100% open source, 100% free software. That's one of the big things. If you ever look at, there's another version of Ubuntu out there called GNUsense, which has a different kernel, the Libre kernel, which is a kernel without any binary objects and blobs in it. It is designed to work with everything. It works with a subset of the hardware, but there's no binary, there's no proprietary software inside it. That's what I'm basically looking for. Actually, several years ago, there was one of the OpenBSD releases. What you doing?
I'm going to redo this. Hang on.
Okay.
I want to make it easier to read.
So how healthy is the Free Software Foundation?
The Free Software Foundation is pretty healthy.
Good.
Stallman is still around. He's got a Genius MacArthur grant, so he'll be all right for many, many years to come.
Good.
I mean, there's right now the one thing that's interesting about FSF is how they're trying to deal with cloud. Because the idea is if you have any GPL software, or GPL2 or GPL3, you can use as much as you want to internally and present it to the outside world through the cloud without making the source available. Some companies that we know of that are very large that do oogly things, let's say, put that way, use that kind of stuff. Oogly moogly, yes. That do those kind of things, use a lot of open source software. There's something they contribute back to as well, but they tend to have the capability to keep their source in house because of the GPL way to do it. There's another variant of the GPL license called 8GPL, the Alfresco GPL, I believe is what it's called, which deals with stuff like the cloud and stuff like that. So better?
Yeah.
Okay. So Libre CMC is a fork, a militant fork, I suppose. Now, of OpenWRT that is SFS approved. This means it doesn't have binary blobs, and source for everything is available. Everything. You can build the whole thing without having to worry about anyone else being under any different licenses or something. If you've ever taken a MacBook, put Linux on it, and had to go out and grab binary blobs to be able to see various network cards, stuff like that, or if in your Debian box you've had to install Linux non-free firmware, all that kind of stuff. It's pretty good. One thing is that Libre CMC supports less hardware. Obviously, that's just because it doesn't support blobs for everything. That's about all we're going to say about it. Now it looks like a lot like OpenWRT. Tomato, it's another firmware. It is a fork of the HyperWRT firmware, which has kind of fallen off. This is kind of a successor. This one is partially open source. The GUI is under a more restricted license, which is kind of interesting because they didn't want people just like picking up and just putting on a different router like the have with OpenWRT. It doesn't support as much hardware. One thing is the emphasis on stability. It's supposed to not need to reboot hardly at all. It's supposed to just keep up high throughput, all that kind of stuff. I played with Tomato on one router a long time ago. It seemed to work pretty well, but I mean, I then went back to DDWRT, which is just where my comfort is. So, can I use new firmware? That's the question. Take a look at your router model number, including the revision. The revision is incredibly important because manufacturers will flip out chips left and right on those, or they'll make a change. They'll cut the RAM in half or cut the the memory in half, all that kind of stuff. One of the most popular routers to play with is the TP-Link 841ND, N or D. The D stands for detachable, so you can take the antennas off. You can take antennas off this one as well. I just don't know if they'll ever go back on. But it's cheap. It's around $20 on Amazon. Supports both OpenWRT and DDWRT for most revisions. Keep in mind for OpenWRT, they don't recommend it as much as they used to anymore because of its limitations. It only has 32 megaflat. What was it? 32. Gosh, I can't remember the exact specs. I'll take a look at it in a couple minutes. But it's got one thing to keep in mind is routers. You're talking like 4, 32, 6, 18 meg of flash, and about that much memory. You're not talking gigs. You're not talking unlimited capabilities here. So definitely keep that in mind. TP-Link also recently released 84N version 17. This uses a new MediaTek processor and it no longer works. So make sure that you research this quite a bit. This will be changed in the future. One thing you can keep in mind is when you buy a router off of Amazon, they don't normally tell you what the minor revision is at the end. It just says TP-Link 841N or whatever version it is. Crap, how do you know? How do you know? Well, usually you're best off seeing it physically. I recommend checking on both databases, OpenWRT and DWRT. There's no reason not to get one if you're just making one out from scratch. That supports both if you want to play with both. Yeah. If you're looking for just a router, like I mentioned before, I recommend DDWRT highly. If you're looking to turn your router into a computer, I would consider OpenWRT. Both are very good. OpenWRT makes a very good router. DDWRT makes it a halfway decent computer, so you can make either one do the other thing. It's just by default, this is the way they work. One other thing is see if your manufacturer's unofficial port of OpenWRT or DDWRT, because official or unofficial can be very nice because that way it's packaged up for you, it's ready to go. Example being the Nighthawk one that I have had no success with, well, some success with, is unofficial, but it's very nice because it's all put together, it's all available. It can be quite useful, it can save you some time on that. How do you flash your router? Nowadays, for most routers, it is incredibly simple to flash the firmware out now. All you have to do is go to the GUI, select upload firmware, and take a firmware from DDWRT or OpenWRT and select that, load it, let it boot it, and then restart the system. That's it. And some come with a miniature version of the firmware to get initially started, then have a full version that has other capabilities and stuff. Like if you want to have the capability to do things like USB drive, all that kind of stuff, some don't have everything installed. Some have a Tor, VPN, all that kind of stuff installed with them. It's very nice. Keep in mind, it isn't this easy on all routers. There's a very nice Asus router that is sold as a T-Mobile cell hotspot. You'll see that every now and then available. It's like $40 refurbed and stuff like that. Goes on sale for slick deals from time to time. To be able to put DDWRT in there, you have to reformat, repartition, reorganize everything in the memory to make it look like a regular version of it. Why? Because T-Mobile doesn't want you using it. They don't want to subsidize you're having a nice router. That's what it comes down to. That's really what it comes down to. And they have every right to do that. They have every right to put the various bars in place. But you also theoretically have every right to go through every one of those bars you want to and fix it. So keep in mind that is the way it is. We say, yes. this is my whining about how tough things used to be in the old days. When I did one of my first routers for DDWRT, I did a Netgear N600. I had to use telnet a bunch of NVRAM commands to do this. The problem was I was using a Macintosh for the serial connections, and getting in the time window to interrupt the boot to get control was incredibly fragile. And of course, after that, you just end up rebooting, trying again and again. It was ungodly how long it took me to get into that, because I was had a lot of problems with it. But eventually, I did get it. Once I was flashing DDWRT, it ran great. I mean, it's still it's in a box somewhere, but I'm sure it would still run just fine. It's just been superseded by technology over time. But just keep in mind, that's another thing to consider. What do they say about how you have to do it? They say, hey, you get a USB to serial adapter. Just say, no, I'll take a different router, please, unless you really want to do that. Like I said, with this thing, you can get control of it a bunch of different ways. You can hook up a serial port to it through a USB adapter. You can TFTP boot onto an 84.1N. You can do all sorts of wonderful things. But still, I like the web GUI version because I'm lazy in my old age. So you kids don't know how good you have it nowadays. Your gigabit Ethernet and your iPods and your Zunes.
I think that's one of the things I had to do for some of the early ASUS, is like the 520s, was you uploaded a special TRX file, which prepared it. So it was sort of like it went into TFTP mode, then you had to push it over.
I did not do that. I ended up doing the serial port thing. But yeah, no, there's a whole bunch of different steps that a lot of that stuff is all in the past, hopefully, unless you've got really old hardware that hasn't been supported. But if you got a choice, take the easy route. Don't be a masochist. Well, I'll say this. You're a masochist when you start whining about it to other people like I am. So let's flash a router. So let's head over to it. Here it is right now. Come on. Baby. Oh. Did you lose your connection?
Power cycle.
Oh, that darn Windows.
You know.
Windows is letting you know you didn't mean to do that.
Come on. All right.
Unplug, plug in.
No, I think I just need to I need to disconnect from the Exchange guest. There we go. Come on, baby. Be nice to me.
I like the Cylon High and the TP link that goes back and forth.
Do you have a IP from the router still?
Yes, I should have.
Hover over the.
It knows it has no internet, but it should still let me connect. No internet secure.
Go to properties and find your IP.
Oh, you guys would do it the right way.
Get one more dot. Backseat typists.
Ah.
You gotta put HTTP in front of it.
Come on, baby. Why are you being this way? Why you gotta be this way, baby? It was all working fine until DDWRT. It doesn't want to connect because I don't have an Ethernet too, because it doesn't have internet. I don't know why it's being screwed. I just want you to connect. Okay.
0.1.
Yeah.
Or you had 1.1.
Oh. I only had 254 possibilities.
Right. Is it admin?
It is by default. I reset it last night. So
It's now admin 1.
No.
2.
So it's just. So we go to System Tools.
Before we flash it, I will say that their setups are actually not bad for TP-Link compared to some of the other ones.
Yeah, no.
I mean, you can find everything at least.
Yeah. Well, now they're trying to do everything to the phones, which is really annoying because it's like my portal router, which I'll whine about in a bit, has this wonderful thing where you have like a currently limited subset you can actually get to through a web browser. You have to use the phone to actually control it and get it to do what you want it to do. And I'm like, no. But yeah, no, they do a lot of things. I mean, they do give you parental controls, network, wireless, all sorts of wonderful options. But you still control everything. So firmware upgrade, which is totally true in this case.
Version 9.
Come on, browse for me, baby. God, I hate Windows so much. And let's see, which one do we want to do here? There's Web Revert, which is the one I use to revert it back from DDWRT back to TP-Link. There's TP-Link ND Web Flash, which is the one we want. There's factory DWRT bin. I'll always read that. There's a whole bunch of, I saved all the documentation and the original firmwares, by the way, before I did this. I recommend that highly if you care about a router.
Do you download the original firmware or do you get it off the router?
I got the original firmware from TP-Link.
Okay.
So Web Flash, open, and now we upgrade. Are you sure you want to upgrade the firmware? Oh, yes, I do. I want to do it so bad. Which model is it? No! This is DDWRT. Let's see what else. Why did you not like that? Web revert. Why? Why do you have to be this way, baby? Web Flash. Yes, I'm very sure I want to upgrade them. All right. Let me pop out of the window real quick.
It's too bad it doesn't tell you the pattern it's looking for.
It does give an error code. But
Yeah.
I find that generally Googling error codes helps.
That makes sense.
Sure.
Wow, it takes that long.
This machine is a piece of crap. The only reason
Did you disconnect from the internet?
it doesn't need internet to open a local command prompt. But no, it's going to give me grief. I mean, I just want to take a look to see if I'm off on that. Factories WT. No, let's do that one then. Ha! Screw you. Because there was another one in their factory DDWRT bin. Another thing is, when you do this, organize your files. Don't just put them all in one folder that expect them all to make sense when you're demonstrating others. Oh, I want to upgrade this firmware.
Yay. Nice.
So this is a two-step process.
That George.
No.
I tried that when Chad was presenting. I was watching live and I was trying to text him.
Oh.
It didn't bug him though.
But yeah, no, the firmwares have gotten a lot better, but that's one of the reasons why they've gotten better is because they have had competition from other people in the past. Cautiously optimistic. Gonna work fine. Oh yeah. Well, if not, we still learn something. That's the important thing, kids.
Does it change its IP?
No, be 01 still. Yes, you're right. I gotta. If you.
We're only halfway there.
So in your secure infrastructure at your home, do you like log all the IP numbers that try and connect to you?
I used to.
Put them up in a nice Kanban.
I used to.
On bond.
I said it wrong.
No, it makes sense though. It's like moving your cards.
Yeah.
I'll get to that guy one of these
I used
days.
to have my machine. I used to have my machines locked down by MAC address in my internal network, so I was allowed to be seen. And my home network right now is still called We Play, WII Play. And the only reason I have wireless in my house, I believe to this day, is because I broke down and bought a Nintendo Wii, and the Nintendo Wii did not support a wired connection initially. If not, I would have held out against wireless until my dying day, probably. Once I had wireless, I couldn't let go.
I actually bought the Nintendo the wired adapter. Worked great in Linux, actually. But it was only 10100. Can you ping geek? One dot one. Your network changed.
Yes. Yes,
Nice.
it did. So, and the first thing you have to do, but keep in mind also the nice thing about this is right now this is being presented to the world with the same admin interface with Wi-Fi turned on. If you get like an 84.1n, it has the capability to turn the wireless on and off, which is really nice when you're doing this stuff. You don't want to.
So it doesn't do that thing that a lot of routers do where you only get the GUI if you come in with a hardwire. You can get the GUI over the wireless with this?
By default, yes.
Wow.
You can change all that.
I too like the groove salad.
But it gives you a quick idea of what the interface looks like. Gives you all sorts of little pieces of information on who's connected to it. Laptop. Wireless options, which we get to type in again. Right now it's set up as an access point. We can set it up as a client bridge routed, ad hoc, WDS station, WDSPP, wireless modes, all sorts of options.
So I'm trying to connect. See?
Oh, sure we can. Oh, status. Yeah.
There you go.
Oh.
Mr. Matt Payne.
There you go. What a deal.
But
That's nice.
it has the help section on the side that gives you all sorts of stuff. But where it gets interesting is when you start going into the wireless options and you start taking a look at some of the other stuff. Virtual interfaces, you can add theoretically any number of them you want to.
So this is already the full version. It's not like a intermediate step.
No, they're both the same size. But this one has a different header on it for doing flash. Okay. You can upgrade the other version as well. It's not a big deal. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Japan.
So one of the things we'll be talking about a little bit later on is a feature that's going to be added. That's supposed to be being added to this now, which is going to change things for 5 gigahertz in crowded places. But the wireless security, all sorts of wonderful options. You know them, you love them. You love WEP. Everybody loves WEP. MAC filters.
WPA3.
I used to have those turned on for everything I have in my house. I had every MAC address written down and all that stuff. But it's also pretty easy to handle. Services.
Hotspot.
Yeah, one thing that's kind of nice is use your NVRAM for client lease DB. That way, if it reboots, it'll remember who has DHCP leases, which can be kind of nice. Keep in mind, every time you write something to NVRAM, you're theoretically shortening the life cycle of your router by however many milliseconds of stuff. VPN options, servers, clients. You can do all sorts of wonderful with stuff with it. Sputnik, which I've never done anything with. Security, yeah, firewalls, by default. You can filter ActiveX, Java applets, block WAN requests, which usually a lot of people do. You can limit the access to certain IP addresses, all sorts of wonderful stuff. VPN pass-through capabilities, blah, blah, blah. Access restrictions, you put policies on it, all sorts of wonderful things. Website blocking by keyword, by URL address, quality of service, port forwarding, port triggering, UMP, EMZ, quality of service. Quality of service, you can say, I want everyone who's doing Voodoo to have, doing Chrome, whatever, have this kind of quality and all that kind of crap. You can do all sorts of wonderful things with it. Illustration, yeah.
So there's your GUI management.
Yeah.
Can be disabled, or you can say allow.
Yeah.
Outside access.
That's really
nice.
There's
tons and tons of options on it. You can have reboot periodically, like every week, if you're concerned about things. You can have it impersonate the MAC address of your device you previously had hooked up if you need to, because if you don't want to deal with Cox and all that kind of stuff, you can do that.
Disable the reset button.
One option they have on some of these, like this one's got 5 ports on it. You can say, hey, take the 5th port, which is normally the uplink port, and just treat that like a regular port. There's all sorts of weird options on there. There's
wasn't there? Well, oh, there it is. Syslog.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You can do all. That's what the one I was looking for was the wireless. Let's see. I don't know if this one gives you enough control of that component. It is on all sorts of wonderful sites.
You have it syslog to some central server.
Yeah.
Nice.
Do all sorts
got mine doing it. Can be awfully chatty.
It is awfully chatty. This is just 2.4 gigahertz too, so you know, so with all sorts of wonderful stuff. Once you figure out how screwed you are about connectivity. One thing I was wondering about the setup of the wireless. Do I have? On that basic settings, I don't have
advanced settings.
There we go. Yes, that's what I was looking for. Here's one thing you can do. There's various channels that we use in the U.S. that aren't allowed, that are used other places. Like if you send this to Japan, you would get access to, like, I think it goes like 1, 6, 11. Yeah, gives you a couple access to a couple upper bands which are not FCC approved. In that situation, you can get access in a place where other people don't do it. I don't recommend that. I really don't. But it does. If you do move with your router, it's kind of nice. Transmit power. That's one that will give you a chance to burn out your router, like it turned into a very nice thing.
The thing about the regulatory domain too is if you're actually using that, your other wireless router has to be able to.
Yeah. But most of them do. I don't know. I don't know if there's one like that. Some stuff's locked, some stuff isn't. There's all sorts of wonderful options you can play with. And if you go through the wiki, people will spend hours trying to figure this stuff out. Access point isolation will try and do some magic stuff about how it works. There's all sorts of
play with the beacon interval.
Yeah. You can do all sorts of wonderful stuff with it. But it gives you, it opens up a whole lot of capabilities. A lot of these capabilities are available in the regular one as well. But this offers a little bit more of what it can do. And the nice thing about this is, this firmware is from 8.22.18, and a lot of routers tend to drop off after a certain point in terms of support. They'll probably support this router for who knows how long. That gives you a quick idea of what some of the things it can do. It makes it a pretty good router is what it comes down to. It makes it into and then you can do all sorts of wonderful things with it. There's a lot of section I'm looking for.
Is there just like a mailing list or something you can subscribe to know when it's time to upgrade? If you do this, you upgrade, you know.
Like he wants notification.
Yeah, no, I don't know. I don't know on that, to be honest.
Yeah.
I just do mine like every month.
Okay.
So I tend not to do mine. There has been like 2 or 3 big events they've had over the years where they've actually sent out this stuff to general mail, purpose mail list that they've been like, hey, they're all going to be vulnerable to this or that. And I'm just looking for the one thing I was looking for. What? Yeah, let me see which one is it. There's one thing I want to. Oh, security. Firewall. I was looking for my options for. There's a place where you can actually put IP table of rules in this as well.
Oh, it was under admin. It's like a command terminal window. Commands to left. Up.
Over to, oh, commands. That's the one. Yeah, you can give it various commands here and stuff like that. It makes it, it's amazing when you can do. The one thing about it is you don't get great feedback on the command whether it's successful or not. Is what I've noticed in the past. But I've got mine set up with DNS masquerade rules that are built in. Well, when I'm running it, that's how we got like my printer set to a permanent IP address and so on and so forth.
Do you remember the old bar?
The old bar. Yes.
Bishops.
Yes, I did.
We had the wireless down there.
Ah.
I put 2 commands in there to prevent people from using their own DNS.
Ah.
So they had to use OpenDNS.
You block 53 to anything but theirs. Very nice.
So they couldn't bypass and look up porn in the middle of the bar.
You are what we call a buzzkill. But there's all sorts of capabilities. So, but what it does, I mean, it provides a lot of capabilities. But this just makes it into a better router. If you look at Lifehack, or they have an article, they have a whole bunch of articles that talk about this. One of them is how to turn your $60 router into a $600 router. Is one of the things to refer to it. Because back in the time, a lot of this stuff wasn't supported. But that gives you a kind of quick idea of what it looks like. The interface is pretty straightforward. There's help for most things, and God help you if you don't read the help.
I like the radio schedule. I think I use that a lot, just from the standpoint of, okay, the business opens at 11, so turn it on at 10:30. They close at midnight, shut it off at midnight. You don't have anybody outside of business hours sitting in the parking lot downloading torrents.
Yeah. A place I knew another bar actually used to. What they have is one of those little timer things. That's set to go off and turn it off and on. they went a little over tech on the solution, but there's a whole bunch of capabilities inside what it can do. But it gives you an idea. But it makes in some routers it can speed stuff up quite a bit. Other ones not so much. But it can do all sorts of wonderful, wonderful things. And to get back to the original firmware in this case, you would do firmware upgrade again, and tell it to reset the flash and go to get the one that's called web revert. In this case, because they had the web revert out there, I downloaded that when I downloaded the other firmware, which I want. So that's overall what that looks like. Any questions about what it kind of looks like or anything? Comment? Yes, you got it.
I'm just curious how the backup works. Is it just download an ISO of whatever changes you've made, or?
Oh yeah, the backup. It just
it's a bin file.
It's just a bin file. Yeah, I forgot to mention that. Yes, backup.
But sometimes when you have jumps between versions,
I'm
trying to remember if DD-Wort's okay on the config files.
Yep. NVRAM backup, because all it's backing up is just a tiny little bit of memory it has. So boom, that's it. It's only like a couple meg. So nice. Yeah, so it works really well. Keep in mind, that is the one thing about it. They did recently went from version 2 to 3, and not everyone had what you'd call a pleasant experience. If you don't have a pleasant experience with it, there's the option to factory defaults, and that is your friend in certain cases, because that'll get you back to where you need to be. But no, it's all works pretty well. I mean, it seems pretty happy. I mean, I've used it pretty much as a basic router. I've played with tons of different settings on it over the time and stuff like that. But I've got it down to the point now I pretty much just hook it up as a router, create a couple virtuals and stuff like that, lock stuff down, and it's pretty happy with it.
Factory defaults just takes you back to WRT.
Yep.
No, without routers hardware.
Nope. For that, you got to do the web revert thing. So almost everyone has a web revert available. Almost all the routers have a web revert available. If they don't, in some cases, there'll be instructions how to use the factory firmware for like the company to be able to revert back to what you got to do. In the worst case scenario, you end up going to the command window and typing in horrible things like NV, RAM, this, that, other things, and that's bad. It's one of those things where you're like, oh man, I really feel bad about this one, because really what that is, it doesn't go like, are you sure you want to do this, or this is the one command that's going to fry this router. It doesn't give me any of that. It is just a faith-based exercise, but it works pretty well. I'm pretty happy with it.
I used a build of that with OpenVPN on it.
Yeah,
it was quite fun because I had to ship it to California, prepped for them.
Yeah.
They weren't going to pay me to go out there.
No, of course not.
But they used it to tunnel all their phones back over to Asterisk.
Yeah, that's another thing people do actually use on this today. There is people using asterisks on these routers as well and stuff like that. It's like, how much processing power does that take? I don't know, but it seems some people say it works for them.
Well, I've had to use it for clients for phones
Yeah.
too, just like in your case with TV.
Yeah.
But the newer Snob phones, you can just stick a wireless adapter in the back. Works great.
But yeah, so definitely it's worthwhile if you have a cheap router. It's definitely worthwhile giving it a shot. If anyone's got any more questions about router, we'll just go back to the presentation. Cool. And we'll see if I can get it to see where we're at now.
You're not in Kansas anymore.
Might be able to do your presentation all offline.
I don't know what's got cached right now. Docs, Google's. I don't think I have the offline option. This machine. I spent $200 on this machine at Best Buy, and it was worth at least $5. It has been one of the worst machines I've ever owned. And I was thinking, well, it must be a problem with this. I'll do this to fix it. And then it's like, oh, I'll fix it with Linux. And Linux didn't fix it because it has what you would call a super shitty processor. I don't know what the technical term is on that. It's something Celeron.
Actually, there's a CD-ROM in it?
Yes.
Wow.
It's got all sorts of wonderful capabilities. It just doesn't work very quickly. The bricking note. I managed to brick one of these routers. Actually, I believe it may have been actually this router itself. A couple years ago by putting the wrong firmware on it. I was able to recover it because what I did is I ended up taking my Linux box, putting a TFTP boot server on there, putting a file in a very special location on my Linux box, which then was picked up automatically by this one thing when it booted, and it was able to restore it back to control, back to health. And then I was able to continue to screw with it over the years.
It's a fascinating amount of work to do that because you
for a $20 router.
Well, yeah, because you have to have your DHCP to do the right stuff to say, here's where you get the file.
Yes, there's a whole load of fun. Actually, no, it actually looks for a specific IP address. Oh. It looks for 10 something, So I managed to get it working without being too big a deal. But it was all laid out in the thing. The only great thing about these things is they also are available. You can actually get into it. You open the box up. There's also a couple places you can put a serial. There's actually a 4-pin connector for a serial USB adapter. You can actually write the firmware to it that way as well. So there's a variety of ways to unscrew it up. Fortunately, the first one I tried worked because I was kind of annoyed with the other ones. The good news is I did buy a USB to serial adapter, which I've used for other things, which made number one cool.
So it doesn't have a console connected?
No, not for $20. No. If you get a real Cisco, you get that. But I mean, once you hook the serial port up, I mean, it is a console pretty much. It's just pretty much the same level of control. But it's when you go from various versions around, it's quite cool to play around with the hardware a bit. I always caution if you're using it on your primary router. First time. One thing to keep in mind is a 30-30-30 rule, which is you see this in the docs, references everywhere, and some places they explain it, some places they don't. The idea is you hold down the reset button on the router for 30 seconds. You unplug the unit. Don't turn the power off. You unplug it, supposedly, and continue to hold the reset button for 30 seconds more. And then you plug it back in and continue to hold the reset button for 30 more seconds. And this will reset DDWRT to defaults, including her password and the user account admin. Some routers, this will also put you in a world of hurt because the ASIS, you just do the first 2 steps. The last 30 seconds puts it in some sort of weird recovery mode in certain versions of it. So once again, read the wiki. That's always the rule of thumb. So, we already did it. So let's plug in the router I've never tried before. Let's see how that goes. I have a red light. I have a green light. I have a red light. Is that good or bad?
It's a game, right?
I now wonder, should I have read the manual?
We're going to do it live.
Yeah.
There's another manual.
I thought there was another manual. That seemed far smaller than I was hoping for a manual.
So you plug it into your USB ports?
For power.
Okay, just for power.
For power.
Okay, so you're going to eventually plug in the Ethernet cable.
Or connect to it over the Wi-Fi.
Nice.
We'll see how it goes. Let's see what we got. See what is showing up here. What is showing up here is I mean, yes. Shazam. Come on, baby.
Looks like you have two DWRTs.
One's the wire connection, one's the non-wire connection. GLARM300. That sounds kind of like what this sounds like. This is a GLAR300M.
Password's probably written on the outside of the box. No, the router itself.
Ah, the router, yes.
Yeah, it was.
Good Life, yes. That's always, of course, a popular one.
Ah, it's the Nebraska one.
Come on, baby. Come on. Come on.
Checking. Working.
You want to allow your PC to be discovered by, oh, I don't think that's a good idea. Actually, one thing to keep in mind is there's been a recent law in California. There's a back and forth on whether or not you are allowed to have one password, generic password, for a device like this, or do they have to have individual passwords for each individual device?
Wow.
Yeah. They've also, that's part of what they did when they were putting back in the old network neutrality thing.
I mean, you just do one and then the serial number.
Yeah, no, it's
Two
supposed,
and then the serial number.
there's supposed to be something about passwords. I just saw there's going back and forth on that. Come on, baby. Come on.
Always.
I am connected. No internet secured. Properties.
8.1.
Of course.
Interesting.
I'll be redirected in 2 seconds. Let's go with English. Let's not make this more exotic than it's got to be.
There's a version of this with an antenna, isn't there?
There's a bunch of different versions of this. They have a whole bunch. They have an AC version as well. The main reason the main one of them.
You don't have enough dots.
The wrong dots.
Oh, I got a match in here for you.
It's giving you the finger.
So this is the interface. It's a slightly rebranded version of the OpenWRT firmware, but it has the app repo, which we can't get to right now. We give you all sorts of various. There's a whole bunch of different packages out there, different firmwares. This has got 227 on it. I believe right now they have 228 out. All sorts of wonderful things that make it available to it. It does have a USB port on the side, so I'm wondering, can it actually, what else can it do?
Like a webcam?
I don't know.
I bet you it does printer. Or flash drives.
You don't have any links? No.
Because it says share at the top there.
One device, no devices, firmware, yeah. So the main way, OpenVPN toggle, that's kind of nice. Actually, you can actually set up this OpenVPN endpoint or both ways. So theoretically, if your company required OpenVPN, you can actually have this be the OpenVPN concentrator.
Is that what the switch does? Is you flip it and then it turns one of those modes on?
I believe, yes. Exactly. You can control what it does. But the main way they sell these is they sell them as people going into hotel rooms and stuff and don't want to pay for the wireless the corporate that whoever makes available. You can just use one of these and just split it off, put your own on there.
Because some of those hotels only let you one device connect.
Yeah. And they also can do a whole bunch more stuff. That kind of gives you an idea what it looks like. But the company is glinet.com. I paid $13 for it. Actually, I paid 12 to 13, and I got like shipping where I said I don't really care about it. So the one thing I was looking for was, but it gives you kind of idea when all the that's kind of when all the OpenWRT internet. It's a little nicer than the regular OpenWRT interface. But let's see the other one.
Huh, look at that.
Yeah. Or PPTP, which of course is wonderfly
beta.
Well, they're all beta. This whole thing is beta. I mean,
So as long as you have your OVPN file ready, then you can just upload it.
So you can generate them, upload them on the other side. But no, it just gives you an idea what kind of capabilities are available. You can also flip it directly to real open WRT if you want to.
Is that what it's under advanced?
No, it's just be a firmware update on it. So we wanted to. So now we have one. We can actually upload all that kind of stuff. Quite a bit of capability for $13. So gives you an idea. It is a different interface. And one nice thing about it is if you're playing with both interfaces, you'll find something in this interface. You're like, well, how do I do that in the other interface type stuff? If we want to, there's also Deb WRT, which we can use to load Debian rights version of it. So theoretically, if you want to, you can put Rogue on here and play it through the interface if you want to. There's all sorts of capabilities it offers to you. Yeah, you can turn the wireless on if you want to, all sorts of stuff. But it just gives you a rough idea what it kind of looks like. Let's go back to the default one. So I want to go back over the GLINet site. All right. But that's the great thing about some of the Chinese manufacturers. They make all sorts of stuff available in terms of cheap.
So every 3 minutes it sends all your packets back to China.
That was gonna be one of the things we're gonna mention. But they have a whole bunch of different routers. If you go to the support,
it's a great one.
Oh, they got some cool stuff. Once again, let's browse the firmware. And this is a AR300M mobile. And you look at it, there's NAND, there's testing, there's Tor. So you can actually download a Tor firmware for this, flash it, and then everything going through will theoretically be going through Tor. So if you just want to set up, actually I've got a slide on that a couple of things later on because I'm going to talk about that. But it has a whole bunch of different options. If you go up back to the parent directory, we're running 227, I believe. And the current version is 3.0. Woo! So there's newer stuff available. But they have their documentation. They have, if you look at their site, they also have, what am I looking for? 300M. Oh, went the wrong one. This is the 300M, which is M300. Yes, there's a whole bunch of different options on there. But they also, if you look, there's you can get this GPL source code that's available for it as well. And they're going to recompile it all. They actually talk about that in the book that comes with it. They mention, which by the way, I got to admit, it's pretty impressive. They mentioned it all on one real page. The section they talk about it, though, is our firmware is developed based on OpenWRT. You can download all the firmwares from our website. It's actually really good English. It's better than mine. GLAR 150 also has an official DDWRT firmware, which you can download from the DDWRT site. DDWRT firmware is not available for other GL models. For further information at their website, this one doesn't have. I didn't see a direct router for it. Tor firmware is available. Compile your own firmware. I like this line. If you have sufficient technical skills, you can compile your own firmware and flash to the router. Please refer to our online docs at GitHub, Domino Team, OpenWRT, CC. U-boot failsafe, if you flash the wrong firmware, you would brick your router, but you can still recover by using the U-boot failsafe. Please refer to the guide at, so it's all laid out. It's pretty impressive. It's worse. But
so if you run either OpenWRT or DDWRT?
Not this one. This one's OpenWRT only. Actually, let's double check, make sure I'm right on that. I could be wrong. That is the 300M. Oops. No, I know it's so connected. And that is it is the GLINet. is? Oh, it's work in progress. WIP, which means maybe someday, maybe someday not. But the OpenWRT is a pretty good firmware in its own right, too. It offers a lot of capabilities. But the ability to run Tor on it, if you guys have ever played with Tor at all, Tor is a really nice way to make sure that you're theoretically not traceable for where your data is coming from and going to. It was actually developed by the U.S. Navy. It's used by a lot of civil rights activists, people doing research on stuff they shouldn't be doing research on, and so on and so forth. And some people just to create interesting traffic logs for other people. So the fact you can put a different firmware on there and get into it with just that level of work is pretty nice. So, yeah. So 5 tips for success. Read the wiki for your router. Number 2 is read the wiki for your router. Technically, that's probably only one step, but I recommend it. It's so big, it should be mentioned twice, because that is going to make all the difference when you do manage to do it differently. Let's leave it at that. Download the stock firmware from your manufacturer as well. Ideally, the current version as well as the latest, by which I mean find whatever version the TP-Link is running on there if it's available. Download that version as well as the latest and greatest, because sometimes they change behavior on stuff. Number 4, consider trying it on another less important router before doing it on your main router, or else make sure you have a plan to back out, because you can foobar your router up for a good period of time to get it back to stock sometimes. Know how to reset to the default firmware. Have multiple plans and avenues available to you if at all possible. If you get to the point where you end up going like, oh, what if this doesn't work? Well, how about TFTP boot, have all laid out in advance. One killer feature that one of these guys is going to add eventually and get really famous for is going to be, I have this router at my house. It's called a portal router. It is a special router. Let's just leave it at that. I've had a relationship that's been love, hate with it. It's the one I have to configure everything on my phone. But it has one amazing feature about it, which doesn't do me any good where I'm living at. By default, there's a whole bunch of bands that are available at 2.4 gigahertz, 1 through 11 in the US by default. And 5 gigahertz, there's a load of bands, but they still fill up. There are certain bands at the end of the 5 gigahertz spectrum that are available to you that the government allows you to use as long as like every half hour you wake up and go, hey, is anybody else from the U.S. Navy or whoever or the U.S. government requiring that band? If not, you can continue to use that band. And so if you're in a place like, let's say, New York, here, any place that has a lot of 5 gigahertz traffic, and you install one of these routers, it will then start using those new bands that are available to it. So all of a sudden your bandwidth goes from crappy to almost like straight regular wired access. And it's been, Portal has had it for some time. It's pretty much their killer feature. That and the fact they can run mesh. But other than that, I'm not using that router anymore. Let's just leave it at that. So, but it's an amazing feature. It's one that needs to be put in some of the alternative firmware. And there's been some work back and forth on it, but no one's actually done it yet. So whoever does it first is a chance to get fame. So if any of you guys want to be famous, like not like John Larson famous. I mean, real famous. But there's been some talk about adding to DDWRT, but another thing to keep in mind is if you do have a different type of router, something work in progress, there's a whole lot of stuff to be done there. Just validating it, writing documentation, because the Lord knows documentation needs improvement on certain stuff. So let's go. So is it worth it? For me, it definitely is. It solved that TV problem I had, which, to be honest, was taking me about 5 to 10 minutes of frustration every Sunday. And also, every time my parents tried to use it, I tried to explain to them how to do it over the phone. So yes, totally worth it for me. I am disappointed the Nighthawk isn't working well yet. I tried every now and then. I have not turned a bug report. I have read other people's bug reports, and it seems like it's just a problem with the router right now. They don't have something handled correctly. They're still working towards it. And hopefully, it'll eventually get straightened out. I do need to turn a bug report, and sometimes other people do simple ones. So, for my isolated network, the ability to have it separate is really nice. Yeah. I may flip from DDWRT to OpenWRT on it to get SCAPE on it, because I do want that capability. Or else, one nice thing about it is, since I do have IP tables, I can just forward packets to remote sites and actually do the interpretation that way. But the problem is, if I do that way, I can't just inject the packet back into it. Just read packet. It would be a read-only stream, or a lot of what I'm doing, a read-only stream will work fine. So, Yeah, I put this one before I started reading about this one last night. I was considering putting together OpenWRT and Tor to create a custom SID on my network that would put all the traffic for that SID over SSID over the Tor network without additional configuration. Was planning on doing it with the 84.1N we flashed, but not anymore. I'm just going to flash this, and my life is going to be good. So that should be it.
Don't they make a 2-port version so you can kind of put it in between?
There's all sorts of options on these things. They make a whole GLI makes a whole bunch of different routers and stuff. A GPL note. This is really a kind of interesting side note. A lot of the GPL actions have been taken by because of manufacturers using GPL code inside their routers. Germany's done a bunch of this over time with settlements in almost all cases. There's been some back and forth about the politics of it because what was the phrase? Somebody, I can't remember the guy's name, and I won't repeat it because I just want to make sure I don't slander anybody. He was pretty much accusing the people for doing a shakedown of certain places that were using it. They were actually asking for settlement of cash money, but then again, it's their work, so it goes back and forth. But so they've done that a lot of stuff. It's resulted in a lot of the open source code being available. It hasn't created legal precedent yet, but it definitely is interesting because it will apply at some time. Eventually, when it does get tested, it will be tested either by this, some other embedded device, or something like that. It won't be tested by a desktop computer more likely. It's going to be tested by something like this, something like this, something like. I mean, it's going to be something like that testing it. So it will be interesting to see. So eventually, it'll become down to be a router issue. The full result resolution. And keep in mind, this isn't just because the kernel. It's because of other utilities such as BusyBox, which a lot of people use, and these routers and stuff like that to reduce space. I don't know if you guys know what BusyBox is. BusyBox is one executable which you give a bunch of different names to, and it has a bunch of different commands. If you link to the executable, you call it ls, it does an ls. You link to it, you call it mount. It looks the first thing it does, it fires out, what is my name? It calls for a piece of code. So you have one executable that does like 80 things. It was created by Bruce Perens a long time ago, and it's been evolving over time since then. So very cool stuff, but it just means that that's factors into it. FCC issue. This is really about 3 years ago. There's a bunch of back and forth on this. TP-Link, one of the router manufacturers I really do like, said they would not support alternative firmwares. We're going to lock down all their routers because they believe the FCC put out a requirement saying you are not allowed to modify your own personal devices. The FCC clarified it after that and said it wasn't the case, and TP-Link reconsidered. Other companies as well, like Linksys and stuff, also talked about it the same way. So that's how it goes. Keep in mind, this could change in the future. There's a whole lot of interesting stuff happening in the FCC right now, as we all know. So it could change anywhere down the road. So, yeah. So one of the reasons why they talk about that is you're not supposed to, you can theoretically change the bands like we were talking about to use bands you're not allowed to. That's one of the components we're talking about on it. Another thing to keep in mind is, I don't know if any of you guys do amateur radio. There's this manufacturer of amateur radios called Baofeng. They are phenomenal. They're cheap. They work quite well. They're very small, very high frequency things. I mean, it's like, what, 30, 40 bucks for one with the adapter for this USB and everything. I've got 2 of them. Oh, yeah, they're phenomenal.
I've got one in the car. I want to see one.
But they're talking about actually pulling their license because they're doing stuff outside their band. Because there's no real restriction saying, hey, you're just going to do what's legal. The Baofeng says, hey, you know, it's almost a software-defined radio at this point. Is what it can do in terms of bands and stuff. So there's a whole bunch of stuff like that. But the reason why that matters is because that factors back into bands, that factors back into possibly FCC restrictions on routers in the future. But cool stuff. If you don't have a Baofeng radio, buy one soon because they are going to get pretty rare.
Have you seen the combo Android handy talkie?
No. I'll show it to you. All right. So Lifehacker, if you guys don't read Lifehacker, it's a combination of both really good stuff and really stupid stuff. An example being, you can read something about how to take your router, improve the quality of it, how to increase firmware on it, and so the next post will be like, hey, when you put a hoodie on, turn it around so the hood's in front so you can fill it full of popcorn and just eat your popcorn. It's not all gold in ideas.
I don't know. I've never thought of that.
Yeah, it's kind of like
changed my life.
Yeah, if you feed the tuna mayonnaise, you will speed this process up. But no, it's but they have a lot of good articles on the various routers, and they've gone into various depths of the firmware and stuff like that. So definitely recommend that highly. The easiest, cheapest way to get started is if you don't have an old router that will work on alternative firmware, there's the Goodwill and 72nd and F. They have a whole bunch of routers. Look for a router that's in the DDWRT or OpenWRT database and give them $5 or $10, whatever they charge for the routers. So they're pretty cheap. Another option is consider buying off Amazon. Keep money, might get a different version. Another thing is go out to Slick Deals, put an alert, and put in OpenWRT or DDWRT, and eventually they'll let you know when they come back on sale again, because these do cycle through every now and then. So you can get yourself one super duper cheap. Yeah, but seeing the router in person is nice. I have had situations with the TP-Links where I've gotten later revisions that had a pain, because there was a while there 12 wasn't supported as well. So that's my presentation. Anybody got any questions? Does anybody have any answers?
So that particular one, you said they have a whole bunch of them. What made you pick that one? What's your goal?
It was $13.
Cheapest one they have.
Yes, that was the one that was on Slick Deals. That was the sole reason I picked this one, man.
What's the use for that for a computer that doesn't have Wi-Fi, for example?
What? Oh, for a computer that doesn't have Wi-Fi, theoretically I can, I'm sure I can override that port and actually use that uplink and use the Wi-Fi out if I had something.
I mean, why else would you purchase one?
Some hotels only let you have one device hooked up to their Wi-Fi.
Or only have wired.
Yeah, so you can bridge it and then broadcast out to your 5 devices.
Yeah.
Huh?
Because they go in as a couple, it's like, oh, honey,
because they're looking at well, if you got 10 kids, they want to charge you 10 for each kid.
And the Wi-Fi. Because yours is free.
Yeah.
So I used to do tech support for SharePoint, and one of our clients is facing ISP that provides internet in hotels, and the reason, like behind the scenes, is because their connection is so shitty that if you connect more than one device, you're going to crash the system. So,
do we need to end the broadcast before we?
I didn't say names. I didn't say names.
Whatever that was, Craig, keep talking smack about that group.
Well, why don't we finish the broadcast? So
they told us.
Yeah.
The connection was bad. So
thanks for coming, everybody online, and we'll continue locally.
Yes, the fries. This one's the one I want. This will make me happy. This will make.